The cardiac monitor flatlined at 3:47 p.m. in the frozen food section of a Pittsburgh supermarket. 67-year-old Richard Patterson collapsed between the ice cream and frozen vegetables, his Medtronic pacemaker, the device that had kept him alive for 3 years, suddenly sending his heart into ventricular fibrillation instead of maintaining its steady rhythm. His wife Linda screamed for help. Shoppers pulled out phones to call 911. A store employee grabbed the AED from the wall. But before anyone could reach Richard's side, a man in hospital scrubs appeared, seemingly from nowhere, already pulling medical equipment from a bag. "I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, cardiologist," he announced with calm authority. "Step back, I've got this." What happened next would be described by witnesses as miraculous. Dr. Webb performed flawless CPR, used his personal defibrillator with expert precision, and had Richard's heart beating normally again within 90 seconds. By the time paramedics arrived 4 minutes later, Richard was conscious, confused but alive, while Dr. Webb modestly deflected praise. "Just happened to be shopping nearby," he told the grateful crowd. "Right place, right time." The local news ran the story that evening. Hero doctor saves shopper's life. It was Dr. Webb's 14th such miracle in 8 months. The hospital where he worked was planning a ceremony to honor his extraordinary record of being in the right place at the right time. But Detective Sarah Mitchell, watching the news report while visiting her mother in the same hospital, noticed something that would unravel everything. In the background footage from the supermarket's security cameras, clearly visible in the parking lot timestamp, was Dr. Webb's distinctive silver Mercedes. The timestamp, 3:27 p.m. 20 minutes before Richard Patterson's heart stopped, 20 minutes before the 911 call, 20 minutes before the coincidental arrival of a cardiologist with a defibrillator. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you value stories about dangerous technology and medical system vulnerabilities, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. My name is David Harrington. For 24 years, I investigated cases that others called unsolvable. This is the story of how a trusted doctor weaponized the very technology designed to save lives, how wireless medical devices became tools for murder disguised as heroism, and how one detective's attention to detail exposed a serial killer hiding behind a white coat and a stethoscope. Dr. Marcus Webb's career had been unremarkable until 8 months ago. Competent but not exceptional. Respected but not celebrated. His annual performance reviews noted adequate patient outcomes and satisfactory bedside manner. He was 41 years old, never married, living alone in a rented apartment, despite a 6-figure salary, with no published research and no leadership positions. Then suddenly, dramatically, everything changed. January 17, 2023. Webb happened upon a man having a cardiac arrest in a hospital parking lot. Successful resuscitation. Minor local news coverage. February 3rd. Webb was coincidentally present when a woman collapsed in a restaurant. Saved her life. Slightly more media attention. February 28th. Webb just happened to be jogging nearby when a jogger had a heart attack in a park. Another miraculous save. Now the local news was calling him the guardian angel of Pittsburgh. By March, hospital administration was taking notice. Dr. Webb's extraordinary response record became the subject of staff meetings. The board of directors began discussing a new chief of cardiology position, with Webb as the obvious candidate. By April, he'd saved 8 lives. A local magazine ran a feature, "The Doctor Who's Always There When You Need Him Most." By May, 13 lives saved. National medical journals were requesting interviews about his situational awareness training methodology. But here's what nobody was asking. How does one doctor witness 14 separate cardiac emergencies in 8 months, in a city of 300,000 people, when the statistical probability of even one doctor witnessing 2 unrelated cardiac arrests in a year is approximately 0.003%? How does a cardiologist just happen to be carrying a personal defibrillator in his car during his off hours every single time? How does he arrive at emergency scenes before paramedics, before other medical professionals, even before most bystanders have finished dialing 911? Detective Sarah Mitchell was asking these questions, and the more she investigated Dr. Marcus Webb's miraculous timing, the more she discovered that miracles, when examined closely, often look like something else entirely. Something calculated, something deliberate, something murderous. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to that supermarket, to that moment when Richard Patterson's heart stopped beating, and trace exactly how we got there. Detective Sarah Mitchell wasn't assigned to investigate Dr. Webb. There was no case, no complaint, no reason to suspect anything wrong. She was simply a daughter visiting her hospitalized mother when she saw the news report and noticed the timestamp on that parking lot footage, 20 minutes early. It bothered her. She couldn't explain why exactly. Maybe it was 24 years of police work training her to notice anomalies. Maybe it was the overly modest way Webb deflected praise in interviews. Or maybe it was something in his eyes during the news footage, not the warm compassion you'd expect from a life-saving hero, but something colder, more calculated. She started researching, just curiosity at first, she told herself, just making sure there was nothing to worry about. She pulled every news report about Dr. Webb's rescues, 14 incidents. She mapped them on a city grid. No geographic pattern. They were scattered across Pittsburgh, from affluent suburbs to working-class neighborhoods. No demographic pattern either. Different ages, both genders, various ethnic backgrounds. But then she noticed something else. She cross-referenced the victims' names with medical records databases. This required some technical help from her department's digital forensics unit, some careful warrant applications, some very specific questions about medical device registries. What she found made her blood run cold. All 14 surviving victims had wireless-enabled pacemakers, every single one. Moreover, 13 of them had the same model, Medtronic Virtuoso Toe, known in the medical device community for having Bluetooth connectivity to allow doctors to check device status and adjust settings remotely without surgery. The 14th victim had a different brand, but the same feature, wireless connectivity via Bluetooth. Sarah pulled the files on Pittsburgh cardiac arrests over the same 8-month period. There had been 41 emergency cardiac events, 27 people survived, 14 died. But when she looked at the survival demographics, a disturbing pattern emerged. Of the 14 people saved by Dr. Webb, all 14 had wireless pacemakers. Of the 13 other survivors, none had wireless pacemakers. They'd survived through standard emergency response, paramedics, hospital ER, conventional care. Of the 14 who died, 9 had wireless pacemakers, 5 did not. Wait, 9 people with wireless pacemakers died during this same period. Sarah dug deeper into those 9 deaths. The official causes: sudden cardiac arrest, pacemaker malfunction, device failure, all of them ruled as unfortunate medical complications. Pacemakers fail sometimes, rare, but it happens. The devices had been analyzed post-mortem by the manufacturers. Technical glitches, age-related degradation, patient-specific complications, nothing suspicious, nothing to investigate, except that in 4 of those 9 cases, Dr. Marcus Webb had been the attending physician when they were brought into the emergency room, already there, already on shift, ready to attempt resuscitation, attempts that failed. And in 3 other cases, witnesses reported seeing a silver Mercedes near the scene shortly before or after the emergency. Sarah brought her findings to her captain. He was skeptical. This was all circumstantial, all correlation without causation, all patterns that might just be patterns. You're telling me a respected cardiologist is somehow causing heart attacks so he can save people? Her captain asked. Why would he do that? I don't know yet, Sarah admitted. But I know the statistics are impossible, and I know wireless pacemakers can be hacked. There was a demonstration at a cybersecurity conference 2 years ago. Researchers showed you could access the devices via Bluetooth if you were within 30 feet. Her captain made a call. Within 48 hours, Sarah was sitting across from Sam Reeves, the FBI's top medical device forensics expert, and Dr. Marcus Chen, a criminal psychologist specializing in healthcare professionals who harm patients. Sam looked at the device data Sarah had compiled and went pale. These wireless pacemakers, Sam said, pulling up technical specifications on her laptop. They use Bluetooth Low Energy for communication with doctors' monitoring equipment. The security on most models manufactured before 2022 is laughable. Basic encryption that can be broken in minutes. No authentication requirements. No logging of unauthorized access attempts. She showed them a demonstration. Using software available on the dark web, she could identify nearby Bluetooth medical devices, connect to them, and send commands. In a test environment with a deactivated pacemaker, she could make it do whatever she wanted: speed up the heart rate, slow it down, stop pacing entirely, trigger irregular rhythms. If someone wanted to cause a cardiac emergency, Sam explained, they'd send a command to induce ventricular fibrillation, a lethal heart rhythm. The patient would collapse within seconds. Death would occur within minutes without intervention, but they'd need to be close, Sarah noted. Within 30 feet with standard equipment, with a more powerful Bluetooth transmitter, maybe 50 to 75 feet, and they'd need to know the specific device model and patient identifier. He's a cardiologist, Sarah pointed out. He has access to all his patients' device information, and he could easily get a list of other wireless pacemaker patients in the Pittsburgh area through hospital databases, insurance records, medical device registries. Dr. Marcus Chen had been listening quietly. Now he spoke. "You're describing something called Munchausen syndrome by proxy in adults," he said, "or more accurately, hero syndrome. It's a psychological condition where someone creates dangerous situations so they can be the hero who resolves them. It's most commonly seen in firefighters who set fires, though rare cases have occurred in medical settings. Why would a successful doctor do this?" Sarah's captain asked. "Because he wasn't successful," Marcus replied. "You said his career was unremarkable. 14 years in cardiology with no advancement, no recognition, no standing out in any way. Then suddenly, 8 months ago, he starts saving lives in miraculous circumstances. His entire professional identity transforms. He becomes somebody." Marcus pulled up Dr. Webb's social media accounts. Before January, barely any posts. After January, regular updates celebrating his blessed opportunities to serve, sharing news coverage of his rescues, posting photos with grateful patients and their families. His follower count had jumped from 200 to over 15,000. "Look at the progression," Marcus said. "The rescues are getting closer together. Early on, one every 2 to 3 weeks. Now multiple per week. That's classic escalation. The psychological reward, the recognition, the admiration, the hero status becomes addictive. He needs bigger and more frequent fixes." "And the 9 who died?" Sarah asked quietly. Marcus's expression darkened. "Probably his early experiments, learning the technology, figuring out timing, calculating how close he needed to be and how quickly he needed to respond. Or cases where something went wrong. Maybe he was delayed in traffic. Maybe someone else started CPR incorrectly. Maybe the patient had other comorbidities that complicated resuscitation." "You're saying he practiced," Sarah said. "He let people die while he learned how to be a better murderer." "I'm saying if your theory is correct, those 9 deaths represent the acceptable losses in his mind, the necessary experiments to perfect his technique for the saves that would make him famous." The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. "We need evidence," Sarah's captain finally said. "Real evidence, not statistics and psychology. Can we prove he has the capability to hack these devices?" "We'd need his laptop, his phone, his electronic devices," Sam said. "If he's doing this, there will be software, there will be device lists, there might even be logs of the attacks. We need probable cause for a warrant," the captain said. "We have Richard Patterson," Sarah replied. "I can interview him about his device, his medical history, his experience during the cardiac event, and I can check Webb's whereabouts. If I can prove Webb had no legitimate reason to be at that supermarket 20 minutes before Patterson's emergency, that might be enough for a judge." But what Sarah didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that Dr. Marcus Webb was already planning his most ambitious rescue yet, the one that would secure his promotion to chief of cardiology. The one that would require 5 simultaneous cardiac emergencies at a hospital charity gala, with Dr. Webb heroically saving all 5 patients in front of 200 witnesses, including medical administrators, board members, and local media. The event was scheduled for 3 days away, and 5 people with wireless pacemakers had already received invitations, carefully selected from Webb's patient database. 5 people who had no idea they'd been chosen not as guests but as props in a performance that would either crown Webb as the greatest cardiac hero in medical history or expose him as one of healthcare's most calculating serial killers. Sarah interviewed Richard Patterson the next morning in his hospital room. He was recovering well, still shaken by the experience, deeply grateful to Dr. Webb. "He saved my life," Richard said simply. "If he hadn't been there, I'd be dead." "Can you walk me through what happened?" Sarah asked. "Everything you remember before you collapsed," Richard thought for a moment. "Linda and I were shopping. Normal grocery run. I was feeling fine, actually. I'd felt better that week than I had in months. My pacemaker had been checked 2 weeks earlier. Everything perfect. We were in the frozen food section. I was reaching for ice cream and suddenly," he paused, remembering, "it felt like my heart just stopped. Not pain exactly, more like everything seized up. Then nothing. I don't remember hitting the floor. And you'd never met Dr. Webb before?" "Never. I go to Dr. Anderson for my cardiology appointments. Different hospital. Did you notice anyone nearby before you collapsed? Anyone paying particular attention to you?" Richard shook his head. "Just normal shoppers. Wait, there was a guy on his phone near the end of the aisle. I remember thinking he was standing in front of the freezer door I needed, but I can't even tell you what he looked like." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. How close? Maybe 10, 15 feet? I had to walk around him. That night, Sarah obtained the supermarket's full security footage, 7 cameras, multiple angles, complete coverage of the store. She and her team spent hours reviewing the recording. There, timestamp 3:26 p.m. A man in casual clothes, jeans, windbreaker, baseball cap low over his face, standing in the frozen food section, phone in hand, positioned near the end of the aisle. His posture suggested he was doing something with the phone, focused on the screen. Richard Patterson entered the aisle at 3:46 p.m. The man with the phone glanced up, made a gesture with his thumb on the phone screen, then immediately put the phone in his pocket and walked quickly toward the store exit. Richard collapsed at 3:47 p.m. 16 seconds after the man left the aisle. Sarah zoomed in on the man's face. The baseball cap obscured most features, clearly intentional, but when he turned slightly at one point, she could see his profile. She ran it through facial recognition software, comparing it against Dr. Marcus Webb's driver's license photo and hospital ID badge. 84% match probability. Not perfect, but enough. And here's what sealed it. The man walked to the parking lot, where a silver Mercedes was parked. The same silver Mercedes from the earlier timestamp. The same silver Mercedes registered to Dr. Marcus Webb. He'd changed clothes. He'd walked into the supermarket in disguise, positioned himself near his target, triggered Richard Patterson's pacemaker to send his heart into lethal arrhythmia, walked calmly to his car, changed into hospital scrubs from his medical bag, waited just long enough to hear the screams and commotion start, and then run into the store as the arriving hero. 90 seconds. That's how long he'd calculated. 90 seconds for the initial panic, for someone to call 911, for Linda Patterson to start screaming for help, for Webb to make his entrance. 90 seconds of chaos before he could step in with calm, professional authority and save the day. But this time, because Linda knew CPR and started compressions immediately, because a store employee reached Richard quickly with the AED, because everything went right in those critical seconds, Richard survived longer than Webb had anticipated. And surviving meant Richard could be questioned, the security footage could be analyzed, the timeline could be reconstructed. Sarah had her probable cause. The warrant was executed at 6 a.m. the next morning. 4 FBI agents, 2 local detectives, 1 medical device forensics expert, Dr. Webb's apartment, his car, his hospital locker, his electronic devices. What they found was devastating. On Webb's personal laptop, software designed for hacking Bluetooth medical devices, detailed documentation on 47 different pacemaker models, a spreadsheet titled Patient Database containing names, addresses, device models, and cellular phone numbers for 183 people with wireless pacemakers in the Pittsburgh area. Another spreadsheet titled Rescue Log with 23 entries. 14 had green highlighting with detailed notes, dates, locations, response times, media coverage, social media engagement metrics. 9 had red highlighting with brief notations, timing error, CPR interference, unable to respond, device malfunction. The 9 deaths, listed in Webb's handwriting with clinical detachment, failed experiments, in his web browsing history, research on cybersecurity vulnerabilities in medical devices, online forums discussing Bluetooth hacking techniques, news articles about the 2021 cybersecurity conference, where researchers demonstrated pacemaker vulnerabilities, vendor websites for high-powered Bluetooth transmitters. In his email, drafts of a book proposal titled Miracles in Medicine, How Preparation Meets Opportunity, with a chapter outline including the importance of always being ready and turning everyday moments into life-saving opportunities. He'd been shopping it to literary agents. One had expressed interest. With your compelling rescue record, this could be a bestseller. In his calendar, the upcoming hospital charity gala, marked with a star and the note, 5 saves Mina's chief position confirmed. And in a folder marked Career Development, a detailed timeline showing his progression from unknown cardiologist to hero doctor, with projections extending into the future. After 20 saves, he'd planned to request speaking engagements. After 30, he'd launch a medical device safety nonprofit that he would lead. After 40, he'd aim for national television interviews. Each milestone required more rescues, more triggered cardiac arrests, more people put into life-threatening situations, so Marcus Webb could play God and decide who lived. Sam Reeves examined the hacking software in detail. "This is sophisticated," she reported, "custom-built to specifically target medical devices. It can identify nearby wireless pacemakers, display patient information if he has it in his database, and send malicious commands that would appear to the device as coming from authorized medical equipment. She demonstrated using the deactivated test device. The software showed a simple interface, a list of detected devices within range, each with signal strength indicator. Click on a device, select a command from a drop-down menu, normal operation, diagnostic mode, emergency override, induce arrhythmia. That last option, induce arrhythmia, a button specifically programmed to trigger lethal heart rhythms. He built this himself, Sam said. This isn't something you download. He spent months developing this, testing it, perfecting it. The arrest came at 9:15 a.m. at Pittsburgh Memorial Hospital, where Dr. Webb was beginning his shift. He was calm, almost eerily so, as Detective Sarah Mitchell read him his rights in front of his colleagues, his patients, the staff who had celebrated his miraculous rescues. "I saved those people," was all he said as the handcuffs clicked closed. "I saved their lives. After you tried to end them," Sarah replied. His trial began 6 months later. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. The software, the databases, the rescue logs, the security footage, the statistical impossibility of his rescue record, the 9 deaths that lined up perfectly with his experimentation period. But the defense tried a novel approach, arguing that Webb had indeed saved 14 lives, that whatever his methods or motivations, those 14 people were alive because of him. They portrayed him as a troubled genius who found an unconventional way to do good. The jury didn't buy it. Linda Patterson testified about watching her husband collapse, about the terror of those moments, about learning later that the man who saved Richard's life had also stopped his heart in the first place. "He played God with my husband's life," she said, crying on the stand. "He decided Richard would almost die so he could be the hero. What if his timing had been off? What if I hadn't known CPR? What if the store didn't have an AED? Richard would be dead, and Webb would have just shrugged and added another red entry to his spreadsheet." The families of the 9 who died testified. Their loved ones had been experiments, practice runs, acceptable losses in Webb's quest for recognition. Sam Reeves explained the technical aspects, how the hacks worked, how Webb tracked his targets, how he triggered the cardiac emergencies and then responded. Dr. Marcus Chen provided the psychological profile, a narcissist with hero syndrome, addicted to recognition and admiration, willing to put dozens of lives at risk to feed his need for validation. This wasn't about saving lives, Marcus testified. It was about being seen as someone who saves lives. The actual patients were props in his performance. Their survival or death mattered only in terms of how it affected his reputation. The most damning evidence came from Webb's own digital records. Prosecutors showed the jury his detailed planning, his target selection, his media strategy, his career advancement timeline. Every rescue had been calculated not for the patient's benefit, but for Webb's professional gain. Even his target selection revealed his callousness. He'd chosen patients who lived alone or had minimal family support for his early experiments, reasoning that fewer people would push for investigation if something went wrong. Once he'd perfected his technique, he'd moved to patients with larger families and social networks, knowing their survival would generate more media coverage and social media engagement. The 5 patients selected for the hospital gala were all prominent community members with large families and media connections. Webb had planned to trigger all 5 simultaneously, requiring them to be within his Bluetooth range at the same time, then dramatically save them one by one in front of 200 witnesses. The ultimate performance. One patient testified about receiving the gala invitation, about how touched he'd been that Dr. Webb, who wasn't even his cardiologist, had personally thought to include him. He'd had no idea he was being invited to his own attempted murder. Dr. Webb chose not to testify in his own defense. His attorney argued that anything he said would be misinterpreted, that the prosecution had created a narrative that wouldn't allow for his side of the story. The truth was simpler. There was no defense. The evidence was absolute. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on 9 counts of second-degree murder. Guilty on 14 counts of attempted murder. Guilty on multiple counts of hacking, identity theft and computer crimes. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. "Dr. Webb, you were given extraordinary gifts, intelligence, education, medical training, the trust of patients. You perverted all of it. You used your knowledge not to heal but to harm. You weaponized medical devices designed to save lives. You turned the sacred doctor-patient relationship into a hunting ground for your ego. The judge paused, looking directly at Webb. You say you saved 14 lives, but you endangered 23. You killed 9. And you traumatized hundreds, every patient with a wireless pacemaker, who now wonders if their device might be turned against them. Every family member who now questions whether the hero doctor who saved their loved one might have caused the emergency in the first place. Life in prison without possibility of parole. 9 consecutive life sentences. Dr. Marcus Webb showed no emotion as he was led away. The aftermath rippled through the medical device industry. Medtronic and other manufacturers issued emergency patches for their wireless-enabled pacemakers, adding encryption, authentication requirements, and logging of all connection attempts. Patients with older devices were offered free upgrades to newer, more secure models. The FDA issued new cybersecurity requirements for all wireless medical devices, mandating security features that should have been standard from the beginning. Hospitals implemented new protocols for monitoring cardiac emergencies, looking for statistical anomalies that might indicate malicious intervention. And Richard Patterson, the man who survived because his wife knew CPR and refused to give up during those critical 90 seconds, became an advocate for medical device security and CPR training. "I'm alive because Linda acted," he said in interviews. "But I should never have been in that position. My pacemaker should have been secure, and Dr. Webb should never have been able to turn a life-saving device into a weapon." As for Sarah Mitchell, the detective who noticed a timestamp that didn't make sense, she returned to her normal caseload. But she never stopped paying attention to impossible coincidences, to miracles that seemed too perfect, to heroes who always arrived just in time. Because sometimes the greatest danger comes from the people we trust most to save us. This is Case 16, The Pacemaker, a story about how wireless technology and medical devices created vulnerabilities that one doctor exploited for personal gain, about how the desire for recognition and status can corrupt even those sworn to heal, about how 9 people died and 14 nearly died so one man could feel important. Dr. Marcus Webb sits in federal prison, serving 9 consecutive life sentences. The hospital where he worked removed all traces of his employment, took down the plaques honoring his rescues, scrubbed his name from their website. But the patients he saved live with a complicated truth. Their lives were preserved by the same hands that tried to end them. Are they grateful? Should they be? Can you thank someone for saving you when they're the reason you needed saving? These are questions without easy answers. What we can say with certainty is this: when we place our lives in the hands of medical technology, we trust that the devices in our bodies and the doctors controlling them have our best interests at heart. Dr. Marcus Webb proved that trust, once given, can be weaponized as easily as any Bluetooth signal. The pacemakers designed to keep hearts beating became tools to stop them. Also, one man could play hero, and 9 people died in his rehearsals.